Okay, I think we're going to start now. Welcome back. This is Agora School of Experimentation, and this is our third class in digital experimental art, where we're learning Blender. We're going to cover mixed media art today, and yeah, we'll just jump right in. I'm going to start with the PDF presentation, and then we'll get into Blender and you'll be able to follow along. All right. So here you can see my screen, which includes the presentation. So again, this is an introduction to digital experimental art with Blender. And today we're going to cover mixed media art. Just some of examples of the projects that I made using mixed media. Basically, by mixed media, I mean I'm using 3D, 2D drawing, photography, video, and animation all together in one project, and also collages. So the main thing that we're going to add today is going to be a really cool tool in Blender called Grease Pencil. It's probably one of the most underrated and underused tools in Blender, but I personally think it's really powerful and cool, and I hope you guys think that too, and hopefully I can get you inspired to try it and try projects using it, because it's really cool. One thing is that, you know, it's basically kind of like drawing in you know, digital drawing, but there's so much more you can do with that drawing, not just simple it's not just a simple drawing tool. And also you can combine it with many other things like the 3D and photography, all kinds of things. So what we're going to cover today is, like I said, Grease Pencil, both 2D and 3D, because you can also draw in 3D as well, not just 2D. I think that's what sets this program apart from other 2D drawing tools. So we're going to go over keyframe animation, which we sort of started last class when we did animated the sculpt that we did. And then we're going to talk about adding other media, which we also covered a little bit in previous classes by adding images, but we're going to go over that a little bit more and what else you can do with those images, and kind of layer them together, layer all the things together. And again, we're going to be combining 2D and 3D, which is pretty neat, I think. And yeah, if you want to research this stuff further and get inspired, that's kind of what I look up usually, is look at collage animation. It looks really cool because you can use your own photography or anything you find online and basically create your own pieces with it. And also 2D animation, obviously. Or 3D animation. So these samples, you can see I've used some 3D pieces with 2D images that I took myself. And here it's basically kind of a collage that I created using different textures for building material. And, you know, the rest of it is basically drawing. And, you know, of course, more research and experiment that I'm doing usually is combining my photography with 2D drawings or 3D images. And I find that these tools are really cool for that. So let's see. I'm going to jump right into Blender. So I'm going to open up Blender. And again, I'm using Blender 3.6.2. And this is the welcome screen. For Grease Pencil, you can either start with general or 2D animation. I'm gonna first start with general just to show you a few things, and then we'll start working on a scene, and that's when we'll get into 2D animation. But for now, we can just get with general, and just to just to kind of get you familiar to switch between different screens. You can always go back to 2D animation by clicking this add button and going to 2D animation. But let me just add my key. Do you see what I'm pressing? Hopefully this is good here. All right. I'm gonna make the world color a little bit brighter so you can see what I'm drawing. And actually, in order to see that I'm changing here, you have to go to render mode. So you can see it's much lighter, and we can make it a little bit like maybe light blue, something like that. And right now we have the main cube, camera, and light. Let me add a grease pencil object, which you can do by pressing add grease pencil and then add a blank one. And it's right here, it's showing up here. And we can just rename it test, because we're just testing it. We're not doing anything special. And in order to use the grease pencil, you have to switch from the object mode to a draw mode. And here, after you switch, you get a bunch of different tools here on the left. You can see right here. The first one is probably the main one you're going to use, which is called draw, which, you know, if you click that, you have options from using a pencil, a pen, a marker, and yeah, pencil or airbrush. So if you do a pencil, and I'm just going to draw a little bit circle here, you can see it right here. If you use a pen, it's a little bit darker, and so on. Marker. And you can change the size of the brush here by changing the radius, the strength. And then these little tools are, if they're clicked, then if you're using a tablet and a pencil, you can, it will be pressure sensitive. So if you press harder on a pencil, it will know it. It's not really applicable with a mouse, but just know that it's there if you guys ever use a tablet down the line, which is really useful if you draw a lot. So the next one is fill, which is basically filling the drawing that you've fill tool, basically. You can fill the things that you draw. For example, you can draw a square and then use a tool, fill tool to color it in. But right now we have black, so let's try this. It's actually, a lot of times it doesn't work because if you go into edit mode and you can kind of zoom in, it's kind of inconcise about where the edges are. So you can actually go back to draw mode and go to advanced and check this box called strokes collision. And that will make the strokes, it will sort of fill in the strokes where they're not, where they're more ambiguous. So if you click here now, oh, shoot. What did I do? Oh, I have to change the size too, because right now it's 0. Usually 2 works. Sometimes 3 works. So if I do that now, see, it kind of corrects the lines that might be ambiguous. Okay, maybe I need to do 3. No, okay. Oh, because this is not a fill color. So if I needed a fill color, I need to add another fill color. Right now, it's only a strokes color. So let's do black fill. And then we have to uncheck the strokes and choose whatever color we want. Let's choose yellow. And if we do this now, it fills in yellow. So before, we have two materials here. One is black and one is yellow fill. I should change it to yellow. And the black fill, as you can see on the panel here, it's the stroke material, so it will only create a line. It will not create a fill. And then yellow fill would be checked fill, and then it would just create a solid fill. All right, the next one is the erase tool, which is obviously it's pretty straightforward. If you draw something, this is how you draw with just a fill brush. So you don't have to have a line. You can just fill like that. And if you draw something you don't like, you can just use the eraser to erase it like that. And another way to fix your mistakes is if you draw something and you want to remove these overlapping lines, you can go to this little cutter tool and you just kind of remove it like that. Sometimes this is more precise. Another thing is drawing can be kind of complicated, especially if you're using a mouse and you might not have the perfect stroke pulled every time. So if that happens to you, there are different ways. You don't have to delete it and redraw everything all the time. If you draw something and you want to, make it a little bit more perfect, you can go to edit mode, or actually sculpt mode. And then what we did in the last class, remember we have the sculpt, and then we can change the brush size by using F and making it bigger. And then we kind of go over it to make it shape into more what we want, right? If you want the more square, or if you want this to be more stretched out, more like a circle, sculpt tool is good for that. That way you don't have to, delete everything you draw. You can kind of play around with these tools as well, because sometimes they're kind of nice. This one is for stretching, and this one is for smoothing, I believe. Yeah. So it smooths it out a little bit. So these are pretty useful. And then if you go into edit mode and you zoom in, you can see here, you can view, select only points, select all stroke points, or select points between other strokes. So if you select this and then you see all the points that are kind of make up the stroke. So all the lines in Blender Grease Pencil are kind of like little vertex points, like in the regular mesh. But and then you can edit just a few points. So if you just select these and do G, Z, you can move them. And then but you can see you don't really have enough points here because you're missing data here. So it's kind of it's not as smooth as you may want it. So in order to fix that, you can select this area and go right click subdivide, and you get more points. And you can continue to do that until you get enough. Like you can just select these points and do subdivide. And now you have more points here, and going back to sculpt mode, it's much more smooth now. And if you don't have many points, you won't be able to get the smooth line. Obviously, the more geometry there is, the more vertex points, the smoother you can get your result to be. So those are just some things to keep in mind. So let's go to, and in edit mode as well, you can delete things easy too. Not because sometimes with eraser, it might not cover everything. You can just do box select and then do delete all points. Box select, and then delete all points. And like that, you can just delete full objects from your scene without spending too much time. So going back to what you can do in Grease Pencil is, so the thing is, when you draw, let's say you draw, we have the black thing. Let's just delete the camera, or just hide it actually for now in the light too. Oh, we need the light for light. Okay, so let's, if we look, everything we draw here in the draw mode will be in the orientation of the view. So right now we're viewing it in this specific orientation. And we know this is because this selection is align strokes to current view. So if we draw here, let's say we draw this squiggly lines here, and then we rotate the view, you see how it changes in 3D. And then if we draw lines from here, they will be again from that viewpoint only. So when we rotate and draw again, it will be in a different location again. So this is a really fun and cool way to draw in 3D. But what if you don't want to do that and you want the lines to be in a specific plane? Oh, by the way, in order to know what plane you're drawing, you can activate this canvas option here. So under this viewport overlays menu right here, go down to canvas and click this, and the canvas should appear, but you can't see it right now because our cube is blocking it. If you remove the cube, this is the canvas. So it only extends to these, 10 squares, but it actually is throughout the entire screen. So if you draw here, you go through the X front view and you go like this, it extends beyond the grid, but you can see where the line is. It's all located on that X point of view. But then if you rotate it, the grid changes. So if you go here, the grid is now in our view here. You don't even see that line anymore except for just a point. But if you draw a line along the X-axis from the Y point of view, now you have this line. So this is the way to, so the way to control it where you're drawing is to change the orientation of your view from view to, if you want to do it from the front, from the side, from the top, or where the cursor is. And then the same thing here, you can draw in the origin, or you can put your grease pencil strokes wherever you put the 3D cursor, or you can put it on the surface of an object and stroke. Well, I'll show you what these mean kind of. So let me just go to edit mode and delete them again so you can see it better. All right, so if we put back to draw mode, you can only draw in the draw mode. So if we go to the, let's go with 3D cursor. So we know that our 3D cursor is in the center of the screen, and we change the drawing pane to top view. So that means, see the grid automatically snapped to the floor. So everything we draw will be at the cursor, but from the top. So if we draw from the top, from the Z perspective, here we can draw something, and then we go here, you see it's kind of laying flat on the ground. If we draw again, it's still laying flat on the ground. So that way you can fix your drawing to a specific plane and work from there. So if you want to say, let's say you're drawing something like a little road. Or actually, here, let me draw a box. Just go like this. And here you go. There's a box. And then if you want to move to a different plane, you have to change the cursor where it is. You can put it, for example, on the top. If you want to put another plane on top of that, all you have to do is select the cursor, move it here. Let's say you want it here. Move it here, go back to the drawing tool, and now see the grid is on top here. So now you can simply just, again, either go from here and draw another plane. You can make it kind of coinciding with where the last plane was. And then if you go out, see the plane is on top where we put the cursor and the plane, the canvas. Now, if you want to do side view, you can do the same thing. So you can select the cursor, and let's say you want to do here, but now you don't want the front view. You don't want the top view. You want the side view. Actually, front view like that. So now your grid is like this, and all you need to do is draw. Go back to the drawing tool, and then draw a continuation. Like that. And now you have this third side of the box. And you can continue the same way by adding the, let's see, the cursor here. Then go back to the draw tool. And from here, you can draw the other side of the box. So now we have this rectangle that we created using 2D drawings, but in 3D, which I think is really neat. It's one of the coolest tools in Blender, and I love using it. And now if you draw here, it doesn't matter how you're facing. Again, the canvas is what matters. If you draw here, you can kind of draw in this side. I kind of made it go outside of the line, but you get the idea. From either side, it will only cover that side. It will only draw on that plane. And yeah, and then if you go to, let's go to the other, let's put our cursor here again, and let's do top view. And what we can do now is add yellow fill on top. See, it goes on top. You can add the entire area, kind of. So, and now we have this sort of yellow fill. Now, let's see what options we can do with the fill. And this is where the attached reference images that I sent will become in handy. I sent a few textures. One is basically a texture from a fabric, and a few that I just drew somewhere else, and they're just images. So let's just add those in. So I'm gonna add a new material, and I'm gonna call it fabric texture. And I'm gonna unselect stroke, I'm gonna select fill, and then instead of solid, I'm gonna put texture. And then here you have a drop-down menu, you can select an image. And I'm gonna open the image here, and it's gonna be under my textures is this texture image. I got this image on textures.com. You can go there and you can get a lot of images for free. I think you get a certain quota per month or per week. And then after that, you can buy them. But it's a really useful website if you need more textures. They have a lot of cool stuff. So I highly recommend going there. So now we have this image as a texture, as a fill texture. And in order to use that, let's try putting it on top here, actually. So if we go, oh, actually, no, let's put it on the side. So I'm going to use my cursor again and put the cursor here. And then I'm going to change this to front view. Oh, sorry, no, side view. Sorry, front view. And I wanted to put it here actually. Okay, hold on. Cursor here. And then go back to draw mode. And now I can use my fabric texture to fill this in like this. And now you can see, oh, it's kind of dark, but let me move the light here. Or add another light. So here's our texture, and if I make it brighter, not that bright, let's make it brighter like this. You can see the box is now colored in, this side of the box is colored in this texture. And you can see how this image has sort of, it's almost like the image is ended here and then it starts again. You can change that as well. If you go to, well, let's go to our test thing and draw mode. And then under here, there are some options on the bottom of this thing. You can change the scale of this image. You can change the location and rotation. So right now it's at 1:1. If we make it 2:2, oops, 2:2, you see the image becomes bigger. You can also make it 0 point something to make it smaller. And then you can rotate it whichever way you like. You can move it on the X and the Y. So now basically the entire image kind of covers my area, so I don't need to change anything else. But yeah, so this is how you can add textures. And this is basically a photo image of a texture. You can make your own textures by taking pictures of whatever you have at home and make awesome collages like that. And instead of just taking pictures, you can also draw things. So I'll just add a few other materials here. I had some more that I've like, there's a white polka circles, blue X on clear. So let's just add a few of these. So let's call it blue X on clear. And we will get the fill texture. And this is the one. And then I'm going to add another one. And I'm going to call it, well, let's see. I don't remember what they're called. So let's just add them first. White polka circles. Add another one. Black polka on yellow. And now we can just use these as textures. So I'm gonna draw a few other things here. So let's change this to from front view to view. And we can add the cursor there, I guess. Let's see what we get. Oops. If I draw here, you see it's kind of in the middle where the cursor is, but it's also related to our view. So if we draw like kind of a tree, right? Let's see. Let's go from the front view and draw like a tree. This is a tree trunk. Let's say this is some grass. And this is a tree crown with leaves. And there's some branches here. Yeah, we have this tree. And let's use our created textures to color it in. So let's just, let's do white polka circles. And let's use the fill color to fill this in. And you can see it got filled in. Let's see. It's more natural if you uncheck this use lights. It's more of a drawing. Use lights is basically for cinematic things where you use lights. Now you can see everything better. So yeah, so this is basically something that I just drew in another program, little circles on fixed paper, on fixed canvas, and now I can use it as texture. And for the crown, we can use, let's say, black polka on yellow. And now we have this. So it's pretty neat because you can get really creative with your textures. And then this one, the blue X on clear, I just want to show you quickly. If you draw it, oh wait, I have to go here. If we draw it, I created it on a clear background and exported it as PNG. That way, you know, you can see through it. So it's kind of neat. You can do that as well. So I think that's a good introduction. I think now we're just going to start and create this scene that I wanted to create so that you have something to show at the end of the class. And for that, I'm just going to start a new project. So I'm going to just save as test and close out of that. Let's see. And what we're going to do is basically create this beach scene where I have some sand and a fire and a what is it called, bonfire that you do at the beach. I thought it was it's just something that I was working on for my own project, and I thought it was simple enough to show in the hour or so. So that's what I'm going to do today. Let's see. And I added all the materials and all the images that we will be using. So you hopefully you downloaded them and you see them, or you have them on your computer. All right, let me share the screen. So we're back to Blender, but I'm going to change the 2D animation. So from here, I'm going to go to 2D animation. And we see the canvas here. Let's see. Let me turn on my keys again. Let me open this again because I need to do this from the beginning, from the splash screen. So I'll show you what I'm doing. So I'm just going to select the animation here. And then I get this canvas, and hopefully we all follow along so we're all on the same page. That's why I didn't want to go from the 3D viewport and then make a lot of changes, and maybe some of you will get confused. But okay, so from the 2D animation, we get this blank canvas, and we basically just have a stroke and a camera. And this default stroke is might be a little confusing, and also I want to create a blank stroke so that I can explain things more, because this one has a lot of materials that we're not going to use anyway. But you can play around with these because these are kind of fun too. I'm just going to delete this. And now I don't have a stroke, I just have a camera. So I'm going to add a new grease pencil object, the blank one. And I'm going to call it fire because I'm going to draw and animate fire. And I've added a link to a website that talks about animating fire flame, which is really cool. I'm really happy I came across it. You guys should read through it, and it's a really useful explanation. But I used an image from there to kind of trace back the fire, and you are welcome to do that as well. So if you have that image downloaded on your computer, it's called, I don't know what I called it, fire sample 2, I think. So then here at the add option, you can add image reference, and I will add the fire sample 2. Basically, we will be just tracing this. You can make your own animation if you have a reference image for another fire flame, but these are kind of simple enough and not too many frames. So, and another thing is this is a really cool reference because it tells you which keyframe to draw each image on. So we have keyframes here, and we only are going to be using keyframe 1, 3, 5, and so on. So when you open a 2D animation object, the timeline has this blue button checked. So this little button is blue, which means that it goes into auto keying. So as soon as you start drawing, it will automatically add a keyframe. And then when you change to a different keyframe and then start drawing there, it will create another keyframe, and everything sort of matches by, everything automatically records as a keyframe. You don't get that if you start from a regular general 3D viewport. That's why I wanted to start at 2D animation. And then you can uncheck that if you're done with your drawings, but we have that checked for now. So I'll show you what I mean. So if we go to the fire object and go to draw mode, and actually let me hide this for now. And we start drawing something. Let's say we draw a circle here. You see the keyframe is automatically created. And then if we go to a different keyframe, let's say keyframe 5, and then we draw another circle, you see another keyframe is created, and that old circle is left over on the keyframe 1. And now on keyframe 5, we have another circle. And all we see is like a faded image, which is called onion skin, which is, you can see, or you can hide it here by clicking this onion skinning display option. If you click on it, you don't see the onion skin anymore. So if you go to keyframe 10, you can draw another one. Go to keyframe 15, 20. You see it automatically creates keyframes. You don't have to go right click, add keyframe like we did in the last lecture. So it's pretty neat, and it sort of it makes the work flow a little bit faster. But if you don't want that, you can always unclick this and add keyframes the other way as well. Just right click and add keyframe. So let's say we only want 40 keyframes. Automatically you get 250, but let's say we just want 45 keyframes. And then if we just go back and press play to animate it, you see we have this ball rolling. And now it's sort of a very simple animation. using this many keyframes. And then if you want to make it faster or slower, you can select all the keyframes. And then if you move this cursor here and you go scale, you can make it much faster. You know, and so on. You can make it slower as well. But this is basically very basic animation stuff. So we'll do all that to animate our fire. So we can just select all of them and delete X, delete keyframes. Now we don't have anything. So going back to the fire animation, this is our reference image. I'm going back to object mode, and I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. And put it kind of in the center. This is just approximate. We can move it later if we want to. But yeah, so let's just go with that. Let's go back to the fire grease pencil object. And in order to start drawing, we have to switch to draw mode. And we'll just start drawing. And I mean, you can just kind of zoom in and so we have this GP layer, grease pencil layer. I'm going to rename it to lines because this is going to be my lines layer. And here in the materials panel, I'm going to change it to, well, it's black already. I think I'm going to change it to a pen because it's much darker to see, and it's probably going to be easier for you to see. See, it's kind of big actually. I'm going to change it, the radius, to something smaller, like 30 maybe. Yeah, I think that's good enough. Okay, so, and then this is just basically going to be me kind of following along. And, you know, don't feel like this needs to be perfect because it's a fire. So it's kind of, you know, it can go into many different shapes, but just have something that generally follows this outline. And you can see it's a little bit slower for me because, well, I'm using a pen and it's, I think it takes much slower to use a pen for this thing. So pencil might show the image more. But yeah, so then, and if we go to object mode again, we can just grab it and move it here and go back to fire, draw mode. And now don't forget to move the keyframes. So from 1 to 3. And once we start drawing, you'll see that it's, I'm actually going to turn off the onion skin because I really don't need to see that. And it's kind of more distracting than anything for me right now. That's the next one. Let's go back to our reference. And then go back to fire. So this is a little bit tedious, but that's animation, you know, drawing frame by frame. It's kind of satisfying to me in the end after I've spent all this time drawing many frames to see something come to life. So hopefully you will be able to share the same enthusiasm when you have something done. So it's almost meditative to me. So hopefully you guys have the same experience. Actually, I'm going to go to scope mode and fix it a little bit. So just a reminder, this is still a 3D environment. So if you click here and rotate, you see that it's still a 3D space. But you have to stay in the camera view because then everything will be on that same plane. Okay, let's go back to this thing. Go back to 7, frame 7. And then don't forget to move this. Otherwise, you will overwrite the previous drawing, and it's not what you want to do. I'm going to add a little bump here. Like I said, it doesn't have to be precise, but trust me, when you animate it, it will look cool. It will look like fire. But just play around with different frames. Maybe even look for other reference materials. You can create, there's a lot of information online. You can also get books on animation that have keyframe by keyframe references for like a walk cycle, for a running cycle, for human, for animals, all kinds of things. And another thing you can do is create your own references, of course, by taking a picture of an object or a person doing the specific things you want to animate. And that might take a little bit more time, of course, but it will be your personal reference. And you know, nothing, it's not guaranteed that everything you want to animate will be online for free. So sometimes that's the only option, is to create your own reference. And when you do create another cool animation, please share it with me. I love seeing animations. And it's really satisfying to see hard work come to life. So when you make this, be proud of it and share it. Okay, so then go to frame number 11. And you know, this is, again, this is tedious, but I want to make sure you have something cool to show at the end of the class. So we are doing this. And the thing is, we're right now at frame 11. You actually might be even okay with just quitting here and just having 11 frames, because once you animate it, it looks, you know, fire flame is abstract enough that it will still look like fire if you animate it with less frames. But it just depends how much detail we want and how smooth we want the flame to be, because the less frames there are, the more choppy the video is, kind of. You know, it's the same with like frames per second. If you know about, like, you know, 16 frames per second back in the day, that's how they used to shoot. And it was, the video looked kind of choppy, and now it's all 30 frames per second, so it's a little bit more smooth. But it doesn't mean that 16 frames per second is bad. It's just, it has its own little, like, it has its own mood, it has its own feel. And honestly, I kind of enjoy it. So sometimes I prefer that. So even see, like, if I hide this right now and I just animate that, And let's say I'll stop at 11, 12 frames. And if I just play that, I think it's already pretty good. But let's keep going and let's get just the 17 frames that we have. So oops. We only have 3 more to go. And we need to be on frame 13. So let's see. All these little details just add more personal touch to it. You can add your own little sparkles floating in the air, and it's just gonna look so much more cool. Now we're moving on to the frame 15. You see the old frame where it is until you start drawing, and then it disappears. All right, and we are on the last frame. And don't forget to move the cursor on the 17th frame. It's a lot of little details here. All right. So let's just hide this reference image and we just see what we came up with. I think that's pretty cool. We have something animated, and hopefully you guys have something similar, or if you have something better, that's even better. Now let's color it in by using fill brushes. So you can just create a new material and add those fills in here, but I like to create a new layer just because then I can hide the layer and so on if I need to create more complex scene. So I'm gonna go in here into this data tab here and add a new layer, and I'm going to rename it to fills. And then under material, I'm gonna add a few different materials. Like basically we need bright yellow and probably like an orange one for the two different sections of the flame. And so let's do that. I'm gonna put orange and change from stroke to fill. And then here we need something like that. And then another one is going to be yellow. Change from stroke to fill. Maybe whiter like that, yeah. And now we have to go frame by frame and fill each frame in, because otherwise they will stay on the same frame. So if we use the fill tool and we start with the overall image first, and then we add the fills on top, the smaller fills on top of that. So if we do this and then the yellow, we don't see it here, so sometimes you don't know where to even click to add it. So you can hide this layer and you see where it was. So you just click here and then unhide it again, you get the right place. And then here we go to orange again. And this is showing stuff from the previous frame. I'm going to hide the onions again. And then go to yellow, and I'm not going to hide it to see where my yellow should be. And see, perfect. Okay. Another reason why I chose the line to be as a separate layer is because maybe I don't want that black outline, because fire doesn't really have a black outline necessarily. It's more like a drawing thing. I can just hide that from the image, from the object entirely, but we'll see. We can check and see what we like better. And see, filling it in is much faster than drawing. I don't think it's showing my I need to add this. Sorry, guys. Hopefully you've seen what I'm doing. Okay. So I'm pressing it twice to fill, because the first time it needs to calculate where all those overlapping lines are. Okay, so now we've colored it in, and if you play it, see, that's pretty cool. You can see it from either side. It's a 2D image in our 3D space. And we can decide what we want to do with the black. We can either hide it entirely. So it would be like that. We can also unhide it and change the color, because right now we have it as black, but we can definitely change it to anything we want. We can change it to, definitely not that, but we can do like red or white or another shade of yellow. So it's kind of like more like a fire. And then you can see like that. I think I kind of like that actually. I think yellow is cool. Okay, so I'll leave it at that. Let me save this. Fire, beach fire. So I save this file so that I don't lose it when if my computer crashes. So now that we have this fire animation, we're gonna make little 3D wood logs, sort of, you know, the things that goes on the bottom of the fire. And for that, we can let go of our 2D screen and go back to our 3D viewport, which doesn't appear here anymore. We have to add it again under general layout. So now we're back to our original default location. And if we go from this camera, it looks fine, but I kind of want the fire to be more above the ground, because I'm just gonna put the logs on the ground. So I'm gonna stop this auto keying, because every time I make something now, it will start making auto keyframes for them, and I don't want that anymore, because for the 3D objects, they're just gonna stay still. So I'm gonna uncheck that. Make sure you do that, because it can create a big mess if you start moving things around. So I'm in object mode, and I'm going to just move this up. GX, GZ. So if I imagine I have some wood fire here on the bottom, the wood logs on the bottom, and the fire is kind of a little bit above that. That's where I want it to be. So we can hide this from now. We don't need to worry about this, and let's focus on the logs. And these are just going to be simple 3D low poly logs. You've made something similar before in the first class, but I'll show you a cool material that will make these logs kind of glow with the flame. So in object mode, we're going to add a new mesh, and we're going to add a cylinder. And here on the bottom, there are cylinder options. So I'm going to click here. And for vertices, I'm going to put 8. For radius, I mean, if you think about a log, it's probably less than 1 meter radius. So 0. I don't know, 1, 2, something like that. And depth would be not 2 meters, maybe 0.5 meters. So half a meter, is that a good size for a beach log? Let's see. We can go with that. I mean, I even think maybe the radius should be smaller. 0.1. That might be good. And then go into edit mode and rotate it on the x-axis by 90 degrees. So by pressing R, X, 90, and then enter. And now you have it sort of laying on the ground. I'm going to rename it to log right away. And I'm going to create a collection and call it logs, because I'm going to make a few logs. I'm going to move the first log in here, and let's make it look a little bit more random, not like a very perfect cylinder. So in edit mode, you can press Control R and scroll your mouse up to make more loop cuts and down to make less loop cuts. So I'm going to make like 4 and then press left click to keep them and press enter. So now I have these, I made these loop cuts so I can kind of make some changes to them. So if you remember in the first class, in order to select all the circular loop cuts, we can, well, we can go to either vertex mode, edge mode, or face mode, but let's start with vertex mode. And now to select these, we can go from the X view and into the X-ray. Now we can select this, and now the whole loop cut is selected. Another way of doing it is without the X-ray. I think I already mentioned that before, is by pressing Alt and clicking on this, and then all of them will be selected. So I'm gonna go from the side and maybe turn on proportional editing, so that when I make a change, it kind of goes to whatever my sphere of influence is. So if I press S to scale and see my sphere of influence is pretty big, so I'm gonna scroll the mouse wheel to make it smaller. And then if I, I can change the scale of this specific loop. Maybe go like this. And then if I select this one, I can do G, Z, make it a little bit higher, S to scale. If I select this one, maybe I can make it S to scale a little bit bigger. This one, GZ, maybe like that, scale. And then scale this one. And then I'll go to, I can press 2 to go to edge select. And if I select these edges, shift hold to select 2 and then just grab them kind of to make it a little bit more, irregular looking. And then maybe grab these to the Z and make it like that. And then maybe just grab. Just make it look a little bit more irregular than just, a cylinder. And I think that's pretty good. I'll go to face select, or I can press 3 to select it. And then select this face, no, not this one, but why is it not selecting? Here. So select the space, and then I'm going to press I to inset. So just a little bit of like a core around the trunk, and then E to extrude and put it in a little bit. So now you can see we have sort of like a core thing going on. And then do the same thing with this face. And then do I to inset and then E to extrude. So now we have this log. If you go to solid mode, I mean, it's low poly, but trust me, it will look fine. You can also do shade smooth, so it's sort of like that. But let's, yeah, that's fine. So let's move it from the top. We can move it in the Y direction. Actually, let's move it in edit mode. Grab Y. And then back to object mode. I'll show you why we needed to move it in the edit mode, is because if we move it in the edit mode, location and rotation, it stays 0. But our center is still at the center. So if we were to move it in object mode, then the location would change because we would move it on the Y-axis. And we need to have the location at 0 because we're going to do array modifier later. So we can create another log just to have a little variety. So let's add another cylinder. And we can keep the same, or we can change it a little bit, make it maybe it's 0.12, 0.49, make it a little bit different. And go to edit mode, R, Y 90. And we can hide this one for now. And then Control R, and then make loop cuts. Enter. Go to the X-ray mode and do the same thing we did before, which is make some minor adjustments. So GZ, scale. And then we can move it from the top as well, because it looks pretty uniform here. GY, showing the scale it like that. And then go back to the edge select by moving some of these, even scale them to make it a little bit more random. All right. Something like that. This is basically really random stuff. You really don't need to follow my my edits, but it's only to make them a little bit more different from each other. And then go to face select, and then do the same thing we did before, which is I to inset, E to extrude. Same thing here, I to inset, E to extrude. And there we have it. We have two logs. If we check this one, and let's actually go back to edit mode. Oops, A to select everything, grab X, and this is sort of a tentative location. We'll randomize it later, and then right-click Shade Smooth. Now we have two logs. We're going to be log 2. And I think we can just use an array modifier and randomize them a little bit to make it look like they're more than one, more than two actually. So let's start with this one, and I'm going to add a empty object, empty plain axis, and I'm going to call it rotator, because we can using array modifier we can add more objects in a rotational reference. So, okay, go back to log 1 in the modifiers that you've seen before, add an array modifier. We can add 4, but we want an object offset. And then for the object, we're going to pick rotator. And now look at the rotator. If we select it here and go to this option here, we can change the rotation and rotate the things that we've just created here. So I'm just rotating it on the Z-axis, and now we have sort of a 4 logs here. We can do the same thing with the other one. So add array modifier. Here we need it on the Y-axis, and then we're going to add an object offset. Again, rotator, And we're gonna add 4 of them. I'm gonna add them a little bit further apart, or maybe even closer together. Anyway, it doesn't matter, we're gonna rearrange them. So, but now that since they're in an array modifier, they're one object. In order for us to create them into 4 separate logs, we have to first apply the modifier. So let's go to the first log, and then here from the drop-down menu, we click apply. And now we have 4 different logs. So see, if we just with GZ, we have 4 logs. But if we go to edit mode, tab, and then press P, we can separate these objects by loose parts. So now you can see we have 4 logs. And then we can get out of edit mode, go back to this other one. Same thing here for now, it's just one object. And we just apply the modifier. And then we go to edit mode and press P and separate by loose parts. And now we have another set of 4 logs. So now we have 8 logs from the 2 ones that we've created. And now we can just move them around into this like little pile that usually exists in a fire setting. And rotate them randomly. So first of all of them, I kind of made a mistake, but all of them have origins in the center. So I'm going to change that by pressing right click, set origin to geometry. And so now I need to do this for all of them actually. Origin to geometry. That way we can rotate and move them according to their location and not to 3D center. Oops. To geometry. So, okay. And we can start rotating them from the top. So grab. Something like that. And now from this angle, we can make it like like they're in a fire thing. Move this one inward. This one inward. So that looks kind of good already. Let's make sure it's at the top of our floor. So you see it's kind of below the floor. So I'm just going to select all of them. And G, C. And we don't need the rotator anymore. We can just hide it or delete it, but it's not going to show up in the render. But it can be a little bit lower, actually. Sort of laying on the ground. Something like that. We can rotate this a little bit more. Okay. So let's dim our lights much more so that we can get, actually, let's start with this. Let's add our fire. I think if fire is a little too high. So now we play the fire. We can see already we have this fire in the 3D log, and it looks pretty cool. So the next thing we need to add is sand and maybe a background image. And depending on how much time you have, we might be able to add some sparkles. But let's add sand. So we're gonna add sand, which will be a procedural created sand, which we can add by using, just add a regular plane, go to add mesh plane, and then we can immediately set the size here to, let's say 10. Actually, maybe even more, 20. Yeah, so this is going to be our sand beach. Go back to the camera view and let's look what we see. So we should be higher because we need to see the plane. Let's raise it up on the z-axis here. And maybe we can rotate, oh, sorry, not this one. Rotate on the x-axis a little bit. Anyway, I think that's pretty good. So then in order to change this plane to look like a sand, we can click the plane and then go to shading view, which would be, where is it? Shading, right here, general shading. And we don't need this thing here. Right click, join areas, click. Right click, join areas, click. So now we are going to work with just the material. We're going to create a new material for this and click new, and we're going to call it sand material. By the way, there are many ways to create sand material. This is just one way. Another way is you can actually just add an image with a height map, and then it will create sort of sandy looking material. You can use generative art like geometry nodes to create sand. There are some default landscapes that you can add in. They're under add-ins for Blender that you can just create sand. So there's many ways to do this, but we're gonna do this using nodes just because we've already been doing that and it's kind of neat. So all we need to do for that is if you select everything, you can actually use G to grab, scroll your wheel to zoom in and zoom out, and then Shift A, we're gonna search for noise texture. Click here, noise texture, and then we're gonna add this into the bump node and then into the normal node. Shift A, bump. And then so this goes into height because we're changing the height, and then normal goes into normal. And right now you don't see anything. because, oh yeah, see, if we go to render mode, you can already kind of see that there's a bit of a noise. It's a bit bumpy now. It's not just a straight plane. There's some waves to it. See, I don't know if you can see this well. Maybe I can add another light to make it look better. Let's try to add sun and then rotate it a little bit so we can get some shading going. See, it's kind of bumpy already. So I'm gonna just move the sun here. But let's go back and make more details. Need Shift A mapping node. Oops, no. Vector to vector, and then texture coordinate. And generate it to vector. This is only if you want to change the orientation and stuff like that, but let's just see if we can get it without changing anything. So here on the scale, I would go to something like 150 directly and see we have something that's already looking more grainy, like the sand. And let's work on details to be something like 15 and then 0.7. So you can see already it's it looks kind of like a rough sand. And then we just add color, kind of sandy color, something like that. Yeah, it's gonna be dark sand because we're on the beach at night or in the evening because we're doing a bonfire. So there you go. So we created the sand material and we just added it to the plane, which kind of looks okay. Another thing we can do is to make it a little bit more uneven because right now it just looks like a straight plane, but I think the beach has a little bit more waves to it. So if we hide this plane for now and go here, and I don't know if this is an add-on you have to add, but under mesh, you have to go to landscape. I think you have to add it actually. So let's go to edit preferences. And here under add-ons, you can search for landscape. Yeah, right here, add mesh ANT landscape. This has to be checked. So if you don't have that checked, you won't have landscapes available. So please check that before you add landscape. And then when you go to add mesh, you should have landscape here. If you press on landscape, you have this thing here, but you also have more options. So click here, and here under operator presets, you can change to different kind of landscapes, and you can play around with this. Basically, this is a freebie for you. You don't have to sculpt anything. You don't have to add anything. It gives you all these default landscapes. Play around with this. I highly recommend it. But I think for something like maybe we can add dunes. Yeah, I think dunes will work. And we can add some divisions to make it a little bit more precise. So let's do 356, 356. And I think that's it. And then, you know, it's too small, so we're done with this. So I'm going to scale it. And I'm going to scale it on the Z-axis to make it less hilly, kind of like that. Scale it on the Y-axis. Scale it on the X-axis. And then grab Z, something like that. And then I can add my material, which I already created, which is the sand material. And you can see now we have sort of a more variety with it. Anyway, so let's see, Control A. We're gonna apply all the transforms. Okay, so from this angle, we have this view. Let's add material to our logs. And in order, I'm gonna show you a really cool kind of cartoonish looking material. So since we're combining all these different media, which will be really cool to animate with lights because it's gonna flicker with the flame. So, okay, so we have the log selected. We can select any log and then press new, and we can call this log material. Let's see. And then here, I mean, you've done this already before. We're gonna add a color ramp node and shader to RGB. Add this and this. And we're just going to create levels of different kind of red to sort of imitate the lighting from the fire. So let's just add like 1, 2, 3, 4, I think. So we're going to add 4 different levels here, and then we're going to change the linear to constant. So the first level will be, and I'm going to zoom in to let you see what I'm doing and how it changes with light. So you can already see with all the levels of gray how it's reacting to different light. So here we're going to go with the bright yellow. Where is yellow? Here. Here we're going to go with like a orangey color, but a more bright one. Where's orange? Something like that. Then we do a darker orange. But this is not really orange. Let's see, something like that. I think it's too similar. Yeah, something like that. And then we're gonna go into red, bright red. Yeah, I like that one. And actually we don't need this one. And then this one is just gonna be black. And we probably want more red. Just bear with me, I'll show you what it means. So here, if we add another light, let's call it, it's going to be a spotlight, and let's call it fire light, because that's going to be the light coming from the fire. And we're just going to GZ grab it here. And you can see how it changes the log right away. So if I move it here, you see how it changes the lighting of the log. So let's just change all of these logs to the same color. And then apply to select, copy material to select it. Copy material to select it. So now we have all these logs, and we're actually going to get rid of the sun because we're not going to have sun in the evening. But and we're going to make it darker at night as well. So something like that, maybe. And we might want to get closer to the logs. Oops. Select the camera. Where's the camera? Here. And get closer to it. Yeah. And let's go back to our layout menu. And then if we play, So let's change this firelight to be wider. So the radius has to be wider so we can see more effect on the light, on the logs, and the strength as well. But let's go with size, something like that. So maybe 65 degrees or something. And you can see some of the effect is on the sand as well and some shadow from the logs. And let's change this to 150. Maybe it's too much. You can also change it so the yellow is not that prevalent. So going back to shading and on the log, I think we can remove some of the yellow. And maybe add more red. You see what it does, right? It increases the spectrum for the red. Do that as well. Yeah. And I think if we go to our firelight and see how it affects when it moves. So we can animate this light, just the location, and make it sort of look like it's flickering light. It's still a little too high. Maybe I'll do 50. And we can even change the color of the light if we want. We can make it red or yellow. I think maybe even like make it a little bit orange so that the sand has a different color on it. That might be neat. Yeah. Okay. So the fire is flickering, but the light is not flickering. So that's what we're going to do next. If we select the firelight again, and then we go to object preferences, you see where our Z location is 0.94 something. And let's go 0.9. Let's say it starts here. And then we're going to right click and insert a keyframe. And here under the timeline, we have to go to graph editor here under or shift F8. And now that we're in the graph editor, we can add a noise modifier to this specific animation. So if you click here on the drop-down menu, you can, right now, both X, Y, all three X, Y, and Z location are selected, but we only want to animate the Z location because we only want it to go up and down. So press Z, and then under modifiers here on the right, click on modifiers, add modifier, and add noise. So you can see there's like this wavy thing that added, and the noise scale is 1, strength is 1, offset is 0, and phase is 1. So you can change these things, but let's just play and see what it does. See, it goes up, but it goes up a little too erratically. So I'm going to change the size of this wave by adjusting the strength. So you can see when I play around, the blue line gets smoother. So if it's 0, it's nothing. But if I add a little bit, see, it's better. Maybe 0.5. Maybe even less, 0.3. So just a faint little flicker, maybe even less, 0.1. I think that's good. We can also add animation on the radius of the flame. I think that will be kind of neat. So if we go to under firelight, we go to the light data properties of the light. And right now the size of the spot shape is 68. And you see if we increase it or decrease it, it changes. So let's leave it at 65. And again, right click, insert a keyframe, and it shows up here. And if we select the spot size, we can add another noise modifier to it. So under modifiers, add noise. And it's a little too erratic, I would say. 0.2, I would say, maybe even less. I think that's good. So just a little bit of a flickering effect will be good. All right, so from this angle, we can see our light flickering, our flame going, and we can see our logs. So one thing that I was using for my project with this is to add a photo that I took on the beach. And you can just use whatever photo you want. So you can use the one that I've attached that's under reference images in today's class workroom on Google Workspaces or whatever. So we can add that, but you can add any image you want as a background. So under File, Import Images as Planes, and you just add this image right here, which is, I think it's called beach, ocean beach or something. So here's this image. I didn't rename it in my computer, but I think it's called something else. But basically it's an image with a beach, waves, and a rock. And then I can rename it to background image. And you know, it's kind of small right now, so let's scale it to like, you know, S10. Might be too big, but let's see. And then GY to move it in the back here. GZ. Let's see what it looks like. GZ. Something like that. And make it center. It's really up to you. But I just wanted to show you my entire workflow because this is something that I'm using for my own animation. And yeah, it's kind of how I did it. So another thing I wanted to show you since we have time is to add little sparkles to it. And I'm going to introduce a new thing, which we haven't touched on before, and that's called particles. So let me go out of the graph editor and back to timeline. And so right now we only have about 18 frames, and we had that because we animated only 17 frames of the fire. And if we wanted to have a longer animation, we can definitely do that. So we don't have to end at 18. Let's say we want to go back to our default of 250 frames. So now we have a much longer animation, but when we play it, the fire stops at 18. It doesn't go any further. So in order to make it loop throughout the whole scene, if we click on fire, you see all these keyframes here. We can do is basically we can copy and paste and paste and paste and make, you know, duplicate all these keyframes, or we don't have to do that because Blender has a cool modifier which you can add to any object, any grease pencil object. Under modifiers, so you have the fire selected. Under modifiers, you can add time offset modifier. And here you have to click custom range. And then from 1 to 18, 18. So basically it will just keep repeating loops in a loop, frames 1 through 18. So now if you just play it, it will continue to play this animation throughout your whole animation time. So that's pretty neat. So let's go back to the beginning, and we're going to add little sparkles that kind of go out from the flame, which is, we're going to use particles to do that. And particles are really neat because you can either add different particles floating in the air, or you can add, you can use particles to make hair for characters. So let's create a new collection. So right click, new collection, and let's call it Embers, because it's embers that are emitting from the fire. And then inside this folder, we're going to create a new object under mesh. We can select either UV sphere or icosphere. Let's just go with icosphere. And it doesn't have to be this big. We can make it 0.5. This is actually something we're not gonna render, so it doesn't matter what it is. So I'm gonna scale it even further, and then GZ to make it higher, because we kind of want it to float up from here in the fire. And then under these tool properties here, you have to add particles, add new particle system, and this is going to be an emitter. So let's just rename it again, embers emitter. And if we play this right now, you will see what happens. It emits these particles, which are just balls, and they're called halo. This is what happens by default. And you can see here that the number is 1,000, so it's going to emit 1,000 particles, and it's going to start at frame 1 and end at frame 200. So if you play it all the way, you can see that at frame 200, it's going to stop emitting. The lifetime of each particle is 50 frames, and the lifetime, see, it's 200, it stopped. And then at lifetime randomness is 0, so they all die at 50 frames. You can increase the lifetime randomness. I like to increase it specifically for ambers, because they kind of die randomly when they float into the sky. You know, some of them disappear, some of them keep floating, depending on the strength of the fire. So if you do that, you can't really see this here, but also I want the embers to start before frame 1, because in our animation, it will be like a fire was burning before we got to the scene. So the frame start will be, let's say, -200. So that way, you know, you still have those here. And end would be, let's say 300, because we don't want it to end at 200. We already have 250 frames. So let's see. Now let's take care of the fact that they're falling down and the fact that they're just balls. So we're going to create actual model of embers. So we're not going to use these balls. So we're going to go into the add mesh and add another icosphere. And we're going to tab into edit mode, and then GX to move it out of the scene. And then we're going to go here, and we're going to scale it even further, because it's going to be a tiny ember particle. And then we go to vertex select some of these vertices, GZ, no, scale. Actually, I'm going to select, sorry, the top region here. Scale. GZ, something like that. It's almost like a drop, but it's really not very uniform. So I'm just going to kind of make it more random. Maybe scale it like that. Scale it on the Y axis. So make it kind of flat a little bit. But it's really going to be too small to notice anyway in our scene. So it really doesn't have to be perfect. So I'm going to call it Ember. And I'm going to add a material to it right away. Under materials, I'm going to press new. And it's going to be called Ember material. And it's just going to be a shiny material because it's like a little piece of fire that's flying. Under here, I'm going to add emission. And under color, I'm going to add kind of yellow. And emission strength would be 4. I mean, you can kind of play around with it. Maybe it's too bright, maybe 3. And actually go to render mode and check on bloom, so you can see how it blooms in the dark. Go back here, maybe it's too much. Well, we can play around with this later. Okay, so now that we have our embers, let's go back to our ember emitter. So ember emitter, and go back to the particle properties. And here under render, see this hollow? That's what it means when you have just a default ball floating out of it. We change it to object, and under object, we can select here our ember. And now you see that if you play, there are these little pieces of embers floating. I think I'm going to also show you that scale right now is 0.05. We can change it to make it smaller or bigger. I'm going to leave it at 0.3, and I'm going to add scale randomness. So they're different scale. Maybe even more, 0.05. So some of them are much bigger and some of them are much smaller. Oops. So, all right, now that they're flowing in a very weird way up and down, let's fix that. Let's fix that. So under field weights, we're going to, there's all these field weights you can add for physics properties. We'll just remove gravity so that there's no gravity for them because they kind of have to flow up. And if we play it now, you see they're kind of just going up because there's no gravity. That's how they would behave, giving their mass and their size if there was no gravity. But we want them to float up and kind of in a little kind of a fiery fashion. So we're going to add some force fields. So under add, you can see force field option, and there are many force fields. You can play around with that. It's really fun. So let's add, first one is wind. And basically it adds a wind on the floor, and you can see the air is floating up. So you can't see this in the render, so don't worry about hiding it or anything. But now if we play it, you see that the wind is kind of making it go up, but maybe not enough. So we can go to the wind properties here. Strength is 1. You can try 3 for now. Yeah, I think that works. So if you play, you see they're all floating up, but that's not the right shape of the embers to float up. They kind of have to be closer to the fire. So there's a few ways to do this, but I think the best way is to add a vortex force. The vortex force kind of has this vortex pattern. And if you play it now, I think I want to increase the vortex force a little bit. Let's say 3. Yeah, I think that's pretty good. See, it's much better. So now we see this ugly icosphere, which is our particle emitter. We are going to have to hide it. So under particle properties, go to viewport display and unclick show emitter. And then another thing you have to do is go to cache. And oh, sorry, no, render. Under render, unclick show emitter as well. So that way when we render, it's not going to show up there either. And now if we click play, we don't see the emitter, and it kind of has this flow as if the wind is kind of picking it up with a fire. And I'm pretty happy with it. It's a pretty simple solution to the particle simulation problem, but I think that's kind of what I wanted. The only thing is there may be too many of them. So if I go to particles, particle system, there's 1,000 of them. Maybe I'll increase it to like 500. That might be better, much better. But you can kind of play around and see what you prefer. And yeah, but I'm pretty happy with it, I think. So another thing that you have to notice now for rendering, because we have both grease pencil objects and 3D objects, we have to change something in the settings. Here under, where was it? Maybe here. No, here under view layer, we have combined, we have to press the Z as well. Because if you don't press it, I think the grease pencil either won't show up or it will show up in a weird place. So make sure you check that. And then let's just try rendering an image, not an animation, and see what we come up. So, so we kind of have this thing going on where we have both black and white and color, and that might be cool. I think I'll actually change the sand to be black and white as well. And that's a personal preference. Where's my sand? Landscape. And I think I'm just gonna change it to white. And then the light probably has to be black and white as well. Firelight. Yeah. So now I have a black and white background and the fire is color. Another thing you can do is add light in the back to illuminate your image a little bit more. That's really a personal preference, how illuminated you want it to be, or if you want it to appear like it's a really dark night. Let's see. In order to do that, we can do add area light, RX90. I actually like it because it shows a little bit more of the sand. So maybe we need another light here. So I'm gonna undo this and then just move this one up a little bit. So it gives us a little bit more light from the fire. And if I do render image, yeah, we get a little bit more of the sand texture this way. Yeah, and if I play it, you can even see some shadows from the sparkles that are flying. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with it. So yeah, you can add another light in the background if you want, or you don't have to. But let's just try this. Area RX90, G, Y, move it up here. I'm gonna move. Oh, this is fine. Okay, so where is this light? G, Y, G, C, and I'm gonna move this out because it's not part of the ambers. I can rename this to top light and this one to background light. It's always a good practice to rename everything so that you don't go looking for which light does what. So on the light properties, the size is 1 meter, so we can increase the size to be something like that, like much bigger, I don't know, 9 meters. And I think 10 is good, but you can play around, you know, you can make it much brighter like this if you want the scene to be lit more, but since I'm going for sort of an evening vibe, I think 10 is good. And now it's just a matter of perfecting the scene. If you like it like that, then just leave it as that. And You can change different things in the compositing mode. I think I covered that last time, but I can show it again. If you go to render and render image, this is how it will look like if you render the whole animation. But if we go to compositing and use nodes and move this out of the way, Shift A, search viewer, and then connect this so you can view everything. And then Shift right click and scroll to get these things here together and move this out. And then here, if you wanted to, you can change the whole scene to black and white. Just search for BW. And now you have the entire thing in black and white. And another thing that's kind of cool, I think I've covered that last time too, is add a glare node. And this is kind of where we have to play around with the lighting. You can see it a little bit. If we go, because right now, if you zoom in on the image, you can see the, okay, let me go back to layout, and then I'm going to increase the embers material emission strength to, let's say, 10, just something very dramatic. And then if we go up here where we have more of them in the scene, and we go to render image, let's see if you see this. Oh, you don't see my render. Okay, but if you go to, if I go to compositing, you see my image. Okay, so you see those little streaks that are kind of forming into stars because we have 4 streaks. We can change this to 2 and make it like 2 streaks, or we can change this to fog glow. And then these ambers are glowing more. So I like to add just this, and then from medium to low, makes it glow even higher for some reason. Or high. Yeah, high is fine. So, and then if you want to have even more emission, you can add more emission strength, or you can duplicate this. It will make it a little bit more brighter, but yeah, see, it's pretty bright now. But all right, so we have 250 frames, and let me just check one more thing. Render image. Yeah, it's working fine, because sometimes when we don't add that Z option, we wouldn't add that Z option, it will behave differently, and it might not show the right order of the right layering of things. But I think this is pretty, I think this is kind of what I was going for. So yeah, so if you want to render it into animation, there are more than one way of doing it. So under this little print icon, the output goes by default to whatever you have it by default. Mine goes to a temp folder, but you have to basically select a new location. And I have a location I'm going to create. I'm going to create a new folder and call it render test. And it's going to be in my Agora 3 class directory. So if I just go here to Agora 3 class, render test, select this one, accept, and accept. Here I have some options. I can do a PNG file or JPEG file. If I do that, I will get 250 images as frames. So then if I do that, I basically have to stitch them somewhere in a different software. I usually use Premiere Pro or Photoshop, and Premiere Pro is great. You just basically click one button and it imports the whole sequence, and then it creates like a time lapse, and it will create a perfect animation for you. Another option is to, so I just usually just do JPEG, and then I create 100% quality, and you can also change the resolution. Here it's 1920 by 1080. You can make it 4K if you want to make a 4K video. Yeah, and then another option is you can do some of these video files like FFmpeg, MPEG video, and so on. It really depends on what you want and where you're going to use it. I found that I think FFmpeg video works on most systems, but it doesn't work on some. So like it depends on what your media player is. So if you press this one and then you start rendering, render animation, you will basically have like a placeholder there, and it's going to take a little bit of time because it's going to render every image and then it's going to stitch it together automatically. So you have to give it some time. Otherwise, if you just render each image individually, if you go back to JPEG, it will, so let's say I'm going to go render animation, and let's see if I can share my screen here where it's rendering. You can see it's rendering one image at a time, and you know, it's going kind of slow, but it's not that slow, considering of how much stuff we have going on there. And oh, another thing I forgot to mention. I'm just gonna stop sharing and go back to Blender. So sometimes depending on the particle simulation, it might not render it correctly. Like if we have the particles looking like we did, where they're just flowing upwards like that in the fire, but sometimes you render it and it becomes kind of glitchy. The reason for that is because under particles, so if we go back to our, see, do you see me? Yeah. If you go back to members emitter, and if you see here under cache, we haven't baked this animation, so it might behave differently when we render. If we bake it, then it'll take a little bit of time depending on the simulation. Right now, it's already done, but some simulations are really heavy and they require a lot of processing power. So it might take actually a lot of time for it to bake, but once it's baked, it will render perfectly. So don't forget to bake, especially when it comes to very complicated simulations. But this one, I think, is going to be fine. And then if you make any changes in the simulation, let's say you add another field force or delete field force, you have to delete the bake and then bake it again. And yeah, just be mindful of that. So yeah, I think this kind of wraps up what we had planned for today. So I wanted to introduce you to a really cool tool, which is Grease Pencil, which is, I use it a lot, and I think it's not getting enough attention as it should be. I hope you play around with it and let me know what you think. And I also covered how to do mixed media art in Blender, because you can do, you can add many things, like you can add photography, you can add different textures, you can add animations, you can add video, you can add 3D and 2D together. You can draw in 3D, which is really cool and a really It's a little bit hard when you start, but I think after a while, after you practice, you get a hang of it. It looks really cool. And yeah, we covered drawing and animating using keyframes. We covered more of some basic modeling using low poly objects. We covered procedural textures when we created sand. And what else? Oh, we covered particles, which is a really cool option that you should all play around with. And yeah, I think that's it. So next time when we meet, we'll cover generative art and code art. Thank you, everyone, and I'll see you next time.